Good afternoon, everybody. Dave Walker here with the B2SMB Institute. And in our continuing series of attempting to provide insights and data and, frankly, fact-based research on the state of small businesses from so many different dimensions, I'm really grateful to have Xiomara Pena from Small Business Majority here joining us. Welcome, Xiomara. Z, welcome.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you so much for the invitation to join in on the discussion today.
Now, you're the VP of Engagement for Small Business Majority. Give us the 411. I know you guys have had the opportunity to present a couple of times and introduce your organization to our community, but we continue to have lots of new members, new attendees. Kind of give us the background on you, your organization, what you guys do.
Sure. So Small Business Majority, we're a national small business advocacy organization headquartered out in Washington, D.C. We've been around for 15 years. We're actually celebrating our 15 years as of December. So this is really monumental for us as a small business advocacy organization. We focus on those policy issues of top importance to small businesses. And we consider small businesses being any business that has less than 100 employees. And we also do serve independent contractors, self-employed folks, and majority of the folks that we work with are micro businesses. They have less than 10 employees. And so the policy issues that we work on are around access to capital, are around healthcare, paid family leave, retirement security. How can we equip the small business community with all of the tools and and build pragmatic policy solutions so that they can flourish and play a proactive role in building an inclusive economy that thrives because of their participation. We've also had the pleasure of supporting small businesses with rapid response over the last year. 2020 was a challenging year for many businesses, and in particular for the Main Street businesses that we all love and that make up our local communities. They had a very challenging year. Our organization did over 400 events last year, providing access points for folks to understand the federal relief stimulus packages. We also did some sign-on letters. So we want to help amplify the voices of small businesses. So it's a little bit challenging to try to describe what it is that we do. We're a nonprofit. We're here to serve small businesses, and we also inform policymakers. I've had the pleasure of working with Small Business Majority for 7 years now, and in a number of different roles. As Vice President of Engagement, one of my biggest priorities is ensuring that we are also helping to create a diverse pipeline of business owners whose voices can be amplified in media and with policymakers, and to also support the business organizations that we work with and we collaborate with to have bigger platforms to be able to get these much needed resources out to their communities.
So this may sound like an unfair question, but describe for our audience what makes a minority-owned small business different. What are the differentiating factors of a minority-owned small business?
Yeah, so small businesses come in so many different shapes and sizes. And one thing that I also like to note that I think is also incredibly impactful, and we saw this arise a lot last year due to the conversation around social injustice and systemic barriers. And when we think about, well, what are those systemic barriers that exist, and how do they impact one community more than another? One quick takeaway from even something like the Paycheck Protection Program was a lot of businesses, especially those businesses owned by people of color, tend to be smaller in size. They tend to start with less capital. They tend to not have a significant staff on board. They might be leveraging independent contractors to be able to start their businesses and get their businesses off the ground. Many of these minority-owned businesses also don't have an avenue to obtain the capital that they need, and thus their trajectory for growth is delayed or does take a little bit longer, because obviously if you don't have the wherewithal to be able to get a loan and go out and purchase another piece of equipment, you're not going to be doubling your sales as quickly as you would have liked. And so access to capital is one of those core critical issues for women-owned businesses, for businesses owned by people of color, the Black community, the Latinx community, the AAPI community. I would also caution to say minority-owned businesses are one bucket, and we don't want to leave out other businesses that are also facing challenges around these same issues, like rural businesses. I think that oftentimes we also forget about that piece of the puzzle, but rural businesses are also incredibly powerful, and they also face similar challenges: not enough capital, perhaps not enough broadband access in their local community. And now in this digital economy, I think that that's a huge challenge. So the makeup of these businesses is distinct. And I'll also say a good percentage of businesses owned by people of color don't have access to credit building tools, are essentially credit invisible. Huge numbers when we think about the numbers. And then lastly, I'll just say about 92% of all business structures in the United States have less than 10 employees, and 96% of all business structures in the US have less than 50 employees. So when we put it again in terms of number of employees, again, many minority-owned businesses tend to be a little bit smaller in size.
Isn't there also kind of over-indexing of first-generation immigrant-owned businesses as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first generation immigrants and the immigrant community tends to start businesses at, I believe it's twice the rate of native born citizens. And so they also play a huge role in building up, local economies and local communities based on the businesses that they start.
So that was a great recap. Thank you. And I think it bears repeating constantly. I think in our community that means to serve all small businesses. All small businesses are customers, but don't necessarily understand the substance behind the advantages and disadvantages that certain small businesses face. And I think your insights into rural small businesses are spot on. I mean, I think that they're probably legion. There's probably lots and lots of them, but again, wouldn't have the underlying population to support a lot of revenue, and therefore wouldn't have kind of that huge P&L that they walk into their bank and say, give me a $50,000 line of credit. So I think the more understanding that our user base has of the diversity within the diversity, it is critical. So now overlay, you mentioned it, overlay this last 10 going on 11 months of the pandemic. Can you we all kind of anecdotally have heard that minority owned businesses were particularly hit hard by the pandemic. Have you guys quantified that? And are there any statistics? Are there any kind of reference points that you can give us that really kind of back up what we're kind of hearing through news reports and other outlets?
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the words that I think is most used is unprecedented, right? This has been an unprecedented year. We've seen unprecedented rate of closures. We've seen unprecedented challenges. And it couldn't be truer for the impact that this pandemic has had on small businesses as a whole. But the impact that this pandemic has also had on businesses owned by people of color has been a disproportionate one. Small Business Majority did a national poll last fall, which we just released. So it is up on our website now. And it has a significant overlay of businesses owned, polling with businesses owned by people of color, the Latinx community, Black businesses, and those businesses that are AAPI owned. Now, which is Asian American Pacific Islander. It's important because this poll surveyed about 500 small business owners with significant oversamples with these target populations. And the survey was completed right before the second round of the stimulus relief package. But it did enact, for us at least, some of the information that we needed in terms of figuring out how to best support these small businesses and what kind of impacts they were facing. And there have been some other studies that have been done as well. And I should mention, this is not a poll that is done just of folks in our network. Rather, it was conducted in a scientific manner with a pollster. So some of the key findings that we found was that small businesses are still experiencing major losses in revenue. About 59% of small business owners reported that their business revenues declined during the height of the pandemic and the economic shutdown compared to the same period last year, with about 60% reporting revenue declines of at least 25% and 52% saying that their revenues were still down today compared to a year ago. We also know that small business owners are making difficult decisions to stay afloat. About 1/3 cut employee hours, about another quarter temporarily closed their businesses, and about 24% drastically changed their business model, and about 21% also saw a reduction in wages or compensation. These are the type of decisions that these small businesses had to also make in order to stay afloat during the pandemic. And I think that we can all agree they're really challenging when the sense of uncertainty exists for many communities in terms of trying to plan out what a month out will look like, or when a stay-at-home order will be lifted, is very, very challenging for a lot of these small businesses. When it came to the overlay on how this impacted businesses owned by people of color, we definitely saw that when we think about an anticipation in more cuts over the next 3 months to address the changing economic landscape, this in particular did impact those businesses owned by people of color. Overall, small businesses said that they are likely to dramatically change their model. I referenced some of the other alternatives that they looked at: cutting employee hours, reducing wages, temporary closing. But those numbers, when we look at businesses owned by people of color, do drastically change. In the Black community, when we asked about how many of them were likely to change their business model, about 48% of the Black business owner respondents indicated that they were likely to change. Again, let's remember, initially when we asked all the business owners, that was about 31%. 40% of Latino or Latinx business owners said that they would change their model, and 41% of AAPI small business owners. Again, a drastic increase there. When we asked about having to cut employee hours, about 35% of Black business owners, Black businesses said that they would have to cut employee hours, 38% for the Latino community and the AAPI community. And again, looking at the overall sample, about 20% said that they would reduce hours. When we asked about temporarily closing the business, 29% for the Black business community, 32% for the Latinx small businesses, and 25% for AAPI. And again, the overall sample showed 22% having to close. So, and then I think one of the most stark findings was those businesses that would have to permanently close. When we asked the overall sample, only 14% indicated that they would have to permanently close over the next 3 months. When we asked, those significantly increased, 18% for the Black business community and the Latino community, and 11% for the AAPI community. And I think one of the things that we took away from this research was also, this doesn't capture in full scope the impact of the pandemic for a number of reasons. The poll is also polling folks that are still in business. And so we might have seen, that folks have had to close their businesses. And I think the other interesting or unique takeaway in terms of figuring out the scope of the impact that will be challenging is, we know based on data that many small businesses don't go through formal bankruptcy filing steps in order to close their businesses, especially those owned by people of color. And so when it comes to the data, I think the federal data provided by the SBA or the census will lag a little, and it's going to be delayed for us to really get a full sense of the impact. But already, I mean, this is just following in some of the trends that we saw early on by some researchers, recognizing that this pandemic was having a significantly disproportionate impact on businesses owned by people of color.
The index difference is extraordinary across all those different dimensions of health of business, those questions that you asked. Again, let me ask you an unfair question. Why? Why do you think those, I mean, is it as simple as some of the factors that you describe as what makes minority-owned businesses, or makes them different than other businesses? Or is there something more to it?
I think it's a number of different factors. I mean, one thing that I will say is, a lot of folks, I get this question a lot. Well, the government did provide stimulus. There was a relief package put together to support businesses that were struggling, the Paycheck Protection Program and the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, which the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program was already in existence, but the SBA did classify the COVID-19 pandemic as an emergency disaster, related disaster. And so it applied for a loan there. But the other product that was created in response to the pandemic was the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP program. And unfortunately, what we saw with the first, with 2020's PPP program was that money did not get into the hands of the businesses that needed it the most. The cap there for the program in terms of how it was built, again, we think about systemic barriers, lack of access to a bank or a traditional banking institution. Perhaps you do bank, but you bank with a smaller bank, or you look at an alternative source of capital like an online lender to be able to get lines of credit for your business. Now, the SBA rolled out this program and they leveraged an existing network of SBA approved lenders. Those SBA approved lenders, while they added additional folks, those SBA approved lenders, if you didn't have an existing relationship with one, it was going to be very challenging for you to get in the door.
Right.
Another thing is the caps. The PPP program, initially, you could get up to a $10 million loan. It was open for businesses that had up to 500 employees. And when we think about, again, the makeup and the size of these businesses, they're smaller. The financial institutions had to make decisions around processing these applications. And many of them did it on a first come, first serve basis. And thus it created this very, very massive line, placing some of those smaller accounts at the end of the line. And so there were some steps taken to remedy some of the challenges that we saw in terms of the gaps that were created by this program. In this most recent stimulus package, they gave some additional dollars designated for community development financial institutions, which are really great access points for small businesses that may not have access to a larger financial institution. They also gave additional dollars were allocated and set aside for minority depository institutions. But again, I think that there will be some challenges when we think about just how that money flows into the hands of small businesses. And I think the Paycheck Protection Program, even in the name, the marketing of it, with the Black business community, for example, about 25 million of the 26 million Black-owned businesses in this country have 0 employees.
Right.
And when you think about it from a marketing perspective, like Paycheck Protection Program, I have 0 employees, I don't have any payroll. Like, this isn't a program that I qualify for, even though you could have applied for yourself. So even from that piece on the education side that has to happen, it takes a lot of work to be able to get these resources into the hands. So it's really hard to pinpoint 3 or 4 things that really have widened the gap for access. But I think that there are a number of different factors that have had this impact for these businesses.
Well, the cumulative effect of what you just laid out is, it's not like you're going to only suffer from one of those factors. I mean, if you've got the compounding effect of multiple factors at once, it's going to hurt. So as you look, you've done a terrific job of just kind of laying the groundwork for the differences between the differences and the disadvantages of minority-owned small business, done a terrific job of explaining how those are exacerbated, frankly, by a lot of what happened in 2020. How set the table for what that actually implies should be done to build a diverse recovery.
So building a diverse recovery is not, it's not a matter of how can we try to build policy solutions that oh, my apologies. It's not about trying to build, it's a must. You know, when we think about the impact of a small business to our local economy, let's stop and put it in perspective. Of any dollar that is spent at a small business, 60 cents of that dollar is recirculated in that local community. Whereas we know that that's not the case with bigger businesses. And so these are the main street businesses, again, the ones that we all love and visit. So when it comes to building an equitable recovery, one that is inclusive and doesn't leave folks behind, and we have to be also mindful that even in the 2008 economic recession, there was a significant lag in terms of catching up for some of these target populations. I mean, the most important thing is immediately getting the health crisis under control. We need to reinstate confidence in consumers that can allow for businesses to reopen safely. So each day that passes without a plan, that worsens the effect. And so obviously we've seen a change in administration. We have seen some steps being taken to be able to see a pragmatic solution at the national level, and many states are doing this as well, that really allow for the public health crisis to get under control. We need additional stimulus relief. Yes, we had economic relief come in December. The last piece of relief that came before that was May. So May, December. And that money, once it's signed, doesn't get out the door that next day or that next week. You know, we're just now at the end of January getting that money out of the door. It started earlier in the month, but it's still, it lags a little bit. So we still know as long as this pandemic continues to press forward, we will need additional relief for small businesses in the form of more money being allocated to the Paycheck Protection Program and significant set-asides for those CDFIs and MDIs, just like that was done in the first round. And I would also add, I mean, one of the things that I would say was a slight criticism in this last round was the money was set aside, but the SBA issued their guidelines on, I think it was January 8th, and the program started January 11th. And I don't know many large institutions that can get all of their teams and processes in place in a matter of a weekend or so in order to really be ready to fully launch and really serve their clients. So even giving more of a timeline there.
Right. And
I also
and I would imagine too that if it's not like we don't know who ultimately these small businesses are, or the community banks don't know who the small businesses are that they serve. It's be preemptive. If you know this is coming, then get the application work done, get everybody in permission in the pipeline, get them in a position where they can take full advantage. And that seemed just like a missed step in this whole process is that why are we waiting? If there is going to be really some form of PPP round 3, let's get started now. Let's get the qualified candidates identified now.
I think the challenge there is the financial institutions do have to wait for guidelines issued by the Department of Treasury and the SBA. And so really until those are out, you can have the applications that were used last year, but there were some expanded categories that were, passed in this last stimulus package. So whatever changes were included have to be then put into the guidelines, and then those have to be distributed.
Right.
And so that adds on some time, and it's fine. I think that, there is a sense of urgency to get this support out there because it's very much needed, but we have to do this, we have to do this in a in a collaborative manner, in a manner that is building up the ecosystems that are already established to support these small businesses.
Mhm.
Um, we have a long list in terms of some additional supports. There's a federal program that was established to support states increase access to credit, which is called the State Small Business Credit Initiative. And I think one of the policy recommendations that we have is a reinstatement and sufficiently funding the state-run capital programs to again be able to support small businesses looking for capital. There's a number of healthcare policies. All of these really do help create a pathway of sustainability for preserving those small businesses most vulnerable to having to permanently close.
So, last question. You're speaking to an audience of businesses, small business professionals. You're a nonprofit. Your primary mission is advocacy on behalf of small businesses, and you're speaking directly with small businesses at an enormous rate. What can our members do to help you?
Yeah. I think one of the things that I think is always incredibly important to recognize is as large companies, you also are in a position to serve your clients. And so one of the things that I think any big business can do to support small businesses is paying those contractors within a short time frame. We hear this often. We hear a delayed payment cause significant delays for a small business. This might mean they have to go take out a predatory product online, which happens. I can't tell you how many times we hear of those horror stories, but you're thinking of someone that has to go now and get an 86% APR product in order to sustain their business because they've been delayed payment here elsewhere,
Hmm.
which is a terrible thing. I think the other thing that we ask is the education. Not everyone is in a position to understand, and I think I also take this for advantage for I sometimes disregard it, but what we know about small businesses is so powerful. We have the opportunity to meet with them. We have on the ground teams. We do polling. We do surveys. We're talking to them on a daily basis, and we really have our ear to the ground when we think about all of those top of mind issues for this population. And so if your business is in looking to gather additional insights about how to better support small businesses or the programs that you're yourself developing, whether it's a grant program that your business is intending to launch to support small businesses, I think taking the time to also connect with a nonpartisan group like ours or another organization that does similar work and serves small businesses can also be very insightful in terms of informing how you build that product or program to support this group of small businesses. And we are a nonprofit, so we always are relying on funding in order to increase the programs and our work that we're doing with the small business community. We have offices in 8 different states and 8 different cities across the country, but with the digital outreach work that we're doing, we're really able to target our reach into a number of different states, and we've been able to serve a lot of business owners nationally. So we're really grateful for that.
Well, this has been terrific, like it always is when I talk to you. I always come away from it both inspired, informed, and frankly, a little hangdog. Like, God, why can't we do better with this? This is so critical. I mean, um, it seems like an unfair version of the American dream. It's like, hey, everybody, and Brock Blake, who's the CEO of Lendios, talks so passionately and articulately about the American dream, and about small business being the American dream, the embodiment of it, and to know and to hear the statistics of how many American dreams are basically being disadvantaged by the way, frankly, the institutions and prejudices have been set up. So I really appreciate you bringing that to light. Do you mind if we share your email address and invite folks to reach out to you talk to you about things they're contemplating, wanting more details on the polling and the survey, all that stuff?
No, absolutely. Feel free to send out our information. You can visit us at www.smallbusinessmajority.org. We also have an online hub where we house all of these resources for small business owners called Venturize, venturize.org. And, these are some of the tools that we have. There's a whole bunch of different research. I didn't have a chance to go through all of it, but the finding that we did, it was a pretty big oversample. So I definitely encourage folks to check that out. It's a short read, even if you don't want to go through the full report. And we always try to keep our summaries short and to the point. So yes.
That's terrific. Well, you're my hero, as always. I appreciate you doing this again, and look forward to getting updates from you throughout the year.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks a lot.